possessing a frame as light as a typical shipping container, a fact he knew firsthand from a daring exploit involving a similar container and a hasty escape from port security. He resided amidst the decay of Sector 12, the once thriving human settlement on Veridon Prime, a planet that had initially offered visions of prosperity, but now primarily yielded dashed hopes and an abundance of glowing mildew. His dwelling was a derelict transport terminal where the defunct public address system would occasionally jolt to life, its cheerful pronouncements directed at no one, informing that the subsequent transport to New Brisbane was slated to arrive in approximately 17 years, 4 months, and 6 days. This announcement had been a constant for as long as Cody could recall, suggesting either a profound delay in the transport schedule or a rather optimistic glitch in the computer's programming, a concept his mother might have humorously labeled a positivity issue. His mother. Cody endeavored to keep her memory at bay, yet she had a peculiar knack for surfacing in his thoughts at the most inopportune moments, such as this one, as he navigated the dense foliage of the Whisper Forest in search of salvage. Her voice, a familiar echo in his mind, resonated. "You have skillful hands, Cody. Swift hands. Just ensure you apply them to endeavors of consequence." Had his survival not been a consequence of such skill? The Whisper Forest garnered its moniker from the resonant hum of its crystalline flora, a sound that mimicked whispers. Some of the original settlers believed these trees were attempting communication. The majority of current inhabitants, however, attributed such notions to an excessive consumption of fermented glowfruit by their predecessors. Cody held no firm belief on the matter. His sole concern was the forest's utility, its ample concealment from settlement patrols, its decent shelter from the acidic downpours, and its occasional bounty of discarded materials from fallen supply drones. Today's objective was thermal cells. The ambient temperature within his makeshift shelter had plummeted once more, and without supplementary heat, the imminent cold spell threatened to complete the work, initiated by hunger and solitude. A canvas satchel was slung across his shoulders, and he carried a cutting implement he had ingeniously fashioned from a damaged medical scanner. The blade, while not razor-sharp, possessed the capability to sever standard alloys with sufficient force, provided one was prepared for the inevitable nicks and abrasions to one's knuckles. The surrounding trees emanated a soft, ethereal blue and purple luminescence, their crystalline branches catching the spectral glow of the nebula that dominated Veridon Prime's nocturnal panorama. In the distance, the hub of Port Callaway pulsed with human activity, the arrival and departure of vessels, the clamor of commerce, the routines of ordinary life. Cody had not set foot within Port Callaway for 3 years, not since the incident. He was contemplating abandoning his search for thermal cells and returning to his terminal when an unusual sound pierced the forest's typical acoustic tapestry. A muffled exclamation, the grating of metal on metal, and beneath it all, a low, guttural growl, suggestive not of mere annoyance, but of barely suppressed rage. Every survival instinct Cody had honed over his years on the streets urged him to flee. Unfamiliar sounds within the Whisper Forest invariably signaled peril. Sometimes, it was illicit traders utilizing the cover to transport contraband. Other times, it was bounty hunters pursuing individuals indebted to unsavory characters. And occasionally, it was indigenous fauna that the colonization surveys had conveniently omitted, perhaps to avoid unfavorable impacts on property values. Yet, a different voice, less insistent than his survival instincts but more persistent, echoed in his mind. His mother's voice, once again. Consequential endeavors, Cody. He moved towards the source of the sound. The forest grew more imposing as he pressed onward, the crystalline trees gradually giving way to colossal fungal growths that loomed overhead like organic skyscrapers. Bioluminescent moss coated every surface, bathing the entire area in an eerie amethyst glow. And there, within a small clearing dominated by an ancient communications tower, Cody beheld something that completely eclipsed his search for thermal cells. A Droran. He had never encountered one in person, yet every child on Veridon Prime was intimately familiar with their appearance. The Drorans were among the most ancient species within the Galactic Accord, their civilization predating humanity's interstellar voyages by approximately 12,000 years. Their wings, reminiscent of creatures from ancient Earth legends, consisted of vast, leathery membranes stretched between elongated digits and their scales possessed a chromatic fluidity that shifted with their emotional state. Their heads were adorned with a variety of lineage-specific horns, and their eyes burned with an internal fire that struck some humans as terrifying, while others found it captivatingly beautiful. This particular Droran was bound to the communications tower by restraint cords emitting an amber luminescence. These were military-grade restraints, recognizable from Cody's salvage excursions. The cords encircled the alien's torso multiple times, immobilizing its wings against its back and its limbs at its sides. A strip of adhesive was affixed across its snout, stifling any vocalizations. The Droran's scales were a dark charcoal, almost black, with iridescent undertones that deepened to a rich sapphire when struck by light. Its uniform, torn and stained with blood, bore insignia that Cody couldn't identify, but which radiated an aura of significant expense, the kind suggesting this was no ordinary traveler who had lost their way. The Droran's amber eyes met Cody's, and for a suspended moment, neither moved. Cody's mind raced through his limited options. Option 1, retreat. This was clearly someone else's predicament, and entanglement in Droran affairs was akin to investigating a reactor core out of sheer curiosity. Option 2, report to the authorities. However, the authorities in Port Callaway had long ceased to concern themselves with Sector 12, and Cody's last encounter with a settlement patrol had resulted in a 6-block chase, fueled by their assumption of his intent to pilfer. Option 3, intervention. The Droran emitted a sound from behind the adhesive, ambiguous. It could have been a plea or a threat. Distinguishing between the two was challenging with Drarans. They possessed at least 17 variations of growl, most of which translated to, "I intend to consume your facial features." But this particular utterance held a resonance for Cody, reminding him of his mother's gaze in her final weeks, when illness had stripped away all but her pride, leaving her desperate, exhausted, yet unyielding. "All right," Cody muttered, primarily to himself. "This is likely an exceptionally poor decision." He approached the restrained alien cautiously, his cutting tool held in plain view, not as an aggressive gesture, but as an explanation. The Droran observed him with an intensity that made Cody's skin prickle, yet the alien remained quiescent, making no attempt to break free. "I'm going to remove the adhesive from your mouth first," Cody announced, speaking deliberately and clearly. He was uncertain if this particular Droran understood the common tongue, but politeness seemed a reasonable approach before physically interacting with someone's face. "It will likely cause discomfort. My apologies." He reached up. The Droran was seated against the tower, allowing Cody to reach its snout without needing to climb. He located the edge of the adhesive strip. With a swift tug, akin to peeling off a bandage, the Droran emitted a hiss of pain, revealing rows of teeth far more formidable up close. "Well," the alien remarked, its voice a resonant baritone tinged with an accent that lent a formal air to every utterance. "That was rather disagreeable." "Sorry," Cody repeated. "There is no need for apology. You are rendering assistance. I simply harbor a strong aversion to adhesive-based restraints." The Droran's gaze shifted to the cutting tool in Cody's hand. "Is that a medical scanner you have repurposed into a blade? Ingenious. Although I must caution you, these binding cords are military grade, the energy field maintaining their tension cycles every 3 seconds. Cody finished his thought. "I am aware. I have salvaged military surplus previously. One must sever during the low-frequency interval, or the blade will recoil." The Droran's expression underwent a subtle transformation, perhaps surprise, or a re-evaluation. "You are not a typical street urchin, are you? There is a typical kind, I concede. Point taken." The alien winced as it attempted to adjust its posture. "I presume I cannot impose upon you to expedite this process. My captors indicated their intention to return within the hour to retrieve their ransom, and I would prefer not to be present at that juncture." Cody was already scrutinizing the binding cords, counting aloud to track the energy cycle. "Who subjected you to this predicament?" "A group of enterprising individuals who erroneously believed that abducting a Droran diplomatic attaché would be an expeditious route to wealth accumulation without personal exertion." The alien's voice conveyed a subtle irony. "They were partially correct. They did indeed acquire a Droran diplomatic attaché. They failed to anticipate that this particular Droran diplomatic attaché is affiliated with individuals who categorically refuse to negotiate with criminals. Therefore, no ransom will be paid. Cody absorbed this information. And what transpires when they return? The Droran's expression remained impassive, though its scales shifted minutely to a deeper hue. Then they shall discover a fundamental flaw in their business model, leading to considerable frustration. Frustration, in my experience, often precipitates violence. Precisely. Cody resumed his cutting, increasing his pace. The binding cords proved more resilient than anticipated. Despite precisely timing his incisions with the energy field's low phase, the blade repeatedly slipped, and his hands began to cramp. Yet, inch by laborious inch, the first cord started to fray. "What is your designation?" the Droran inquired. "Cody. Cody Bramwell. I am Viren Quelthorn, of the third lineage of HFY, senior diplomatic attaché to the Galactic Accord Embassy on Veridan Prime, and apparently the galaxy's most accessible kidnapping victim." The alien emitted a sound that might have been self-deprecating amusement. "You may address me as Viraen, or Quailthorn, or that imbecile who was apprehended en route back from an evening meal. My colleagues undoubtedly will." "How did they subdue you?" Cody asked, genuinely curious. Everything he understood about Draren suggested their formidable combat prowess. Their innate weaponry included potent breath attacks, talons capable of piercing hull plating, and a wingspan that could render a fully grown human unconscious with a single sweep. "Tranquilizers," Virian admitted. "Industrial-grade sedatives designed for pacifying livestock. They administered approximately 8 doses before I ceased my attempts to evade." He paused. "In my defense, I neutralized the 9th dose." "What?" "I severed the dart in half before its contents could be injected. A minor triumph, but a triumph nonetheless." The first cord snapped free, and Virian exhaled audibly as some of the pressure on his chest abated. Cody immediately turned his attention to the second cord. "Cody Bramwell," the Draren mused. "That is a human appellation." "Last I checked," Cody replied. "Indeed. And what compels a human child to be unaccompanied in the Whisper Forest at night, equipped with improvised tools and a sufficient grasp of military technology to facilitate the liberation of a diplomatic attaché?" Cody considered several potential responses. The unvarnished truth was complex, involving a mother lost to xenoplague, a father who existed only as a name on a form, and a series of inadequate foster placements. It involved theft, concealment, evasion, and the stark realization that self-reliance was paramount. Instead, he stated, "I reside here, in Sector 12, among the ruins." Virine's eyes widened. The derelict sector, the one the colonial administration declared uninhabitable following the seismic upheaval? "It's not that dire," Cody countered, focusing on the second cord. "The ceiling only collapses sporadically. You assert that a human child has been subsisting independently within a condemned sector, scavenging for sustenance, while the settlement authorities remain entirely inactive? The settlement authorities are unaware of my existence. I am not registered. No records, no identity implant, no housing allotment." Cody's voice adopted its characteristic flat tone when discussing this subject. "From the perspective of Veridan Prime, I am not corporeal." The Droran was silent for a prolonged interval. When he resumed speaking, his customary formality had softened. "For what duration?" "Since I was 8 years of age. 3 years." "You have survived independently for 3 years. Nearly 4 now." The second cord gave way. Cody's fingers were visibly bleeding, the raw abrasions on his knuckles having permeated his makeshift bandages, but he disregarded the discomfort and moved to the third cord. "Only 2 more after this one." "Cody," Virain stated, "why are you extending your aid?" "What do you mean?" "You have no acquaintance with me. You possess no obligation to imperil yourself for a stranger. You could have departed. No one would have censured you. No one would even have been apprised of your involvement." Cody pondered this. The genuine response was that he didn't fully comprehend it himself. The honest answer was that something in the Droran's gaze had resonated with a part of him, a shared understanding of solitude, helplessness, and the yearning for connection. However, that sentiment felt too profound for articulation. Consequently, he offered, "My mother used to say that one's true character is revealed by their actions when unobserved, devoid of reward, punishment, or an audience, simply the choice itself. And what manner of individual are you, Cody Bramwell? I am still in the process of discovering that, but I surmise this is an effective method of finding out. The third cord snapped. Viren's wings fluttered, partially liberated from their confinement. His scales had undergone another chromatic shift, now exhibiting tinges of warm amber that pulsed in rhythm with his respiration. Your mother sounds like she was an exceptional woman. She was. She succumbed to xenoplague 4 years ago. Viren's demeanor altered, not drastically, but sufficiently for Cody to perceive it. Drorans did not express emotions in the same overt manner as humans, but a subtle rigidity in his jawline, a specific angle to his horns, conveyed sympathy more effectively than any human facial contortion. My apologies, the alien stated quietly. Thank you. Cody attacked the fourth cord with renewed resolve. So, what is your intended course of action upon your release? To summon reinforcements. That would be the prudent course. Indeed. Regrettably, my abductors were sufficiently diligent to obliterate my communication apparatus and strip me of any means to signal for assistance. Viren's tone reacquired a measure of its characteristic dry wit. They were, however, considerate enough to leave me my dignity, or at least what remnants thereof remain. I might be able to assist with that. Cody paused his cutting to rummage through his canvas sack. I discovered this last week in a crashed drone. I had intended to sell it at the market, but I never managed to locate a buyer who wouldn't inquire too deeply. He produced a compact device resembling a thick silver pen. A Droran emergency beacon, Viren observed, his gaze fixed upon it, his expression one that human translators would likely describe as utterly astounded. The type utilized by their diplomatic corps for precisely such predicaments. How, in the 17 blazes of existence, did you procure one of those from a crashed drone? No idea. The drone had a cord marking, so perhaps it was transporting provisions to the embassy. And you intended to sell it? Hey, I had no clue what it was. I figured it was some kind of high-tech flashlight. Viren emitted a sound that was undeniably laughter, a deep, resonating rumble that seemed to vibrate within Cody's chest. A fancy flashlight, the device that would have enabled me to summon rescue within 15 minutes. And you mistook it for illumination equipment. In my defense, it does illuminate when the button is depressed. I can well imagine. The fourth cord fractured. One more to go. Cody's fingers were now severely cramped, and the blood from his knuckles had seeped through his improvised bandages, but he could perceive the imminent conclusion. Cody, Viren stated, I must impart something to you. Could it perhaps await my success in freeing you? It is pertinent to that endeavor, actually. The Droran's voice had regained its seriousness. The individuals who apprehended me are not common criminals. They are affiliated with a syndicate known as the Hollow Ring. Their operations span 15 star systems, and they are notorious for their brutality. Cody's hands continued their work, but his heart rate accelerated perceptibly. Understood. Should they return and discover you in my presence, they will not permit you to depart unhindered. You are now a witness. You have observed my countenance and the location of my confinement. They cannot afford loose ends. You are relaying this information now? I wished for you to possess the complete context before solidifying your choice. You could still withdraw. Take the beacon, seek a secure location, and activate it remotely. The rescue contingent would eventually locate me, and you would remain uncompromised. Cody considered this proposal for approximately 2 seconds. That is an ill-conceived strategy. I beg your pardon? If I depart and they arrive before assistance materializes, they will relocate me, or they will... He left the sentence unfinished. It was unnecessary. I am completing what I have initiated. Deal with it. The fifth and final cord was more substantial than the preceding ones, reinforced with an additional layer of energy shielding that caused Cody's blade to vibrate painfully upon contact. However, he had now mastered the timing, and he knew that by angling the cut with precision, he could sever the weakest point in its weave. You know, Viren remarked, in Droran culture, there exists a concept known as velthorax. It roughly translates to life bond, the connection forged when an individual rescues another at significant personal peril. It is regarded as one of the most sacred relational bonds possible. Are you suggesting that if I rescue you, We are irrevocably bonded, or something similar. I am conveying that if you succeed in rescuing me, I shall be indebted to you to a degree that my culture deems unpayable, and I honor my debts with utmost seriousness." The final cord snapped. Virian rose to his feet with a sound that was a blend of a groan and a triumphant roar. His wings unfurled to their full span, easily measuring 12 feet from tip to tip, and Cody suddenly grasped why ancient humans had revered beings such as this as deities. The Droran was magnificent, intimidating, and undeniably grateful. "Thank you," Virian stated. The words carried a weight Cody had never before perceived in those two simple syllables. "Thank you, Cody Bramwell. Don't thank me yet. We still need to evacuate this location before." A sharp, guttural laugh echoed through the forest. Cody spun around. 3 figures emerged from the dense foliage, their silhouettes stark against the bioluminescent moss. 2 of them were human, formidable in stature, bearing scars, and wielding weaponry that appeared capable of perforating starship hulls. The third was an entity Cody had never encountered, a creature resembling a colossal bipedal insect with multifaceted eyes that reflected the forest's amethyst glow, and mandibles that clicked in what might have been amusement. "Well, well," the insectoid creature articulated, its voice a harsh, chittering sound that was somehow rendered into the common tongue by a device adorning its neck. "The lizard has acquired a companion. How deeply touching." The 2 human figures moved to flank the clearing, effectively blocking any obvious avenues of escape. Cody's mind raced through his limited options. The distress beacon remained in his hand, but activating it would consume precious time he did not possess. Escape on foot was impossible. The forest was too dense, and his legs too short. Engaging in combat was a laughable prospect. These individuals specialized in the abduction of Droran diplomats. However, Virian was now unhindered, and Virian was a Droran fully equipped with his formidable natural weaponry. "Korvox," Virian addressed the insectoid, his voice possessing a disconcerting pleasantness that sent a shiver down Cody's spine, the kind of pleasantness that preceded imminent violence. "I should have surmised your involvement in this affair. You have always lacked originality, and demonstrably, you have consistently failed to exercise caution regarding your rearward defenses." Korvox's mandibles clicked once more. "Dispatch the juvenile first. Ensure the reptilian observes." One of the assailants lifted his weapon. The events that followed unfolded with such astonishing speed that Cody's mind could only reconstruct them later. Verickson's wings unfurled in a powerful sweep, intercepting the gunman before he could discharge his weapon. The assailant was hurled into a crystalline tree, the impact strong enough to splinter its trunk. The Drorian's tail, a feature Cody hadn't even registered until that moment, lashed out, striking the second human across his legs and sending him sprawling. Then, Veraxon unleashed a torrent of fire from his maw. Not a figurative blaze, but a very real inferno. A concentrated stream of flame shot across the clearing, engulfing Korvox in a searing conflagration. The insectoid emitted a shriek that would echo in Cody's nightmares for years. It stumbled backward, desperately trying to extinguish the flames that seemed to cling to its exoskeleton as if alive. "Run!" Verickson commanded, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Now! The beacon! Activate it!" Cody fled. He plunged through the dense undergrowth, branches lashing at his face and roots snagging at his feet. The crystalline trees seemed to reach out as he passed, their humming intensifying to a fever pitch that mirrored his pounding heart. Behind him, the sounds of conflict reverberated through the forest. Veraxon's roars mingled with cries of pain and the sharp crackle of energy weapons. A bolt of energy hissed past Cody's ear, close enough to scorch his skin with its heat. One of the humans had recovered with alarming speed and was relentlessly pursuing him through the trees. Cody weaved left, then right, employing every survival instinct honed during his years on the streets. He knew this terrain, not intimately, but better than his pursuer. He recognized patches of soft ground that would impede progress, hollow fungal structures he could slip through, and narrow gaps between crystalline trees that he, being small enough, could navigate. The sounds of pursuit gradually faded as Cody squeezed through an aperture between 2 immense crystal formations. He was bleeding from numerous new wounds, his clothing more tattered than before. Yet he was alive, and still moving. From behind him, a roar shook the very air. Varaxin unleashing a sound akin to the fury of 1,000 tempests compressed into a single instant. Then, silence. Cody continued his flight. When he finally halted, gasping for breath, his heart hammering and his hands trembling so violently he could barely grasp the beacon, he found himself at the forest's edge. Below him, Port Callaway glittered, its light spread out like a carpet of terrestrial stars. The night air felt frigid against his sweat-drenched skin, and each breath burned his lungs. The distress beacon remained clutched in his bleeding fingers. He could scarcely feel them anymore. The combined chill of blood loss and sheer terror had numbed him from the wrists down. He pressed the activation button. The device hummed to life, emitting a soft blue glow that pulsed with an unfamiliar rhythm. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly in the distance, he heard the thrum of engines, multiple engines, rapidly approaching. 30 minutes later, Cody sat on a crate in the center of an Accord landing field, swathed in a thermal blanket and clutching a cup of something warm a medic had pressed into his hands. Uniformed personnel bustled around him, coordinating rescue efforts and securing the perimeter. Varaxin was undergoing examination by a drawn physician who tutted disapprovingly at the condition of the diplomat's wings. The 3 kidnappers had been apprehended. Korvax sustained severe burns, while the 2 humans suffered from various fractures and wounded dignity. "Are you absolutely certain you require no medical attention?" The human officer assigned to watch over Cody inquired, a look of concern on his face. "My hands. I've experienced worse." "That's hardly reassuring," the officer replied. "It wasn't meant to be," Cody countered. The officer, whose name tag read Lieutenant Graham, sighed and made an entry on his datapad. "We'll need to contact your guardians, parents, foster family, whomever is responsible for you." "Good luck with that," Cody said. "I'm sorry. No one is responsible for me. I told you. I live in Sector 12. Lieutenant Graham's expression shifted from professional solicitude to alarm. "The condemned sector. There are no registered inhabitants there." "Precisely," Cody confirmed. "You're telling me a child has been living alone in—" Varaxin's voice boomed, cutting through the landing field's chaos. The Droran diplomat strode towards them, his wings neatly folded against his back, his scales now gleaming with the amber undertones Cody associated with happiness. "This officer isn't causing you any trouble, I trust?" "No, sir," Lieutenant Graham snapped to a semblance of attention. "I was merely attempting to ascertain the boy's guardian status so we could—" "I will handle that," Varaxin interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Cody is under my protection now. Any inquiries regarding his status can be directed to the Droran embassy." The lieutenant seemed inclined to protest, but something in Varaxin's gaze persuaded him that prudence was the wisest course. He nodded, made another note on his datapad, and retreated to attend to other matters. Cody looked up at the Droran. "Under my protection? Did you imagine I would permit you to return to a collapsing structure in a condemned sector after you saved my life?" Varaxin crouched down, bringing them closer to eye level. "Cody, I spoke of thorax. I wasn't exaggerating. In my culture, your actions tonight create an obligation that cannot be discharged with mere gratitude. I don't require charity," Cody stated. "Good, because I am not offering charity." Varen's eyes met Cody's with an intensity that was surprisingly non-threatening. "I am offering something entirely different. The embassy has unoccupied residences. There is a school program for the children of diplomatic staff with precisely 1 opening. And I happen to possess more wealth than I could expend in 3 lifetimes, with no offspring of my own to inherit it." Cody felt a stirring within his chest, a sensation that might have been hope, or perhaps terror. "You mean to say you want to?" he began. "Adopt me," Varaxin finished. "That is one interpretation. My species does not employ the exact terminology. We would refer to it as taking a fledgling underwing, but the practical outcome is comparable." "Why?" Cody asked. "You've only just met me. You know nothing about me. I know that when you perceived a stranger in distress, you offered assistance. I know that when you understood the peril was greater than you initially believed, you did not flee. I know that you persevered with your undertaking, even when your hands were bleeding and your body was depleted." Varaxin paused. "I know that you reminded me of something I had forgotten." "What is that?" "That courage is not the absence of fear, but the act of proceeding despite it. Cody gazed at the Droran for a long moment. His entire existence had been a struggle for survival, finding his next meal, his next shelter, a way to endure another day. He had long since abandoned any hope for more. Yet here was this peculiar winged being offering him something he had never dared to imagine. A home, a future, a chance to be more than a phantom haunting the remnants of a desolate sector. "The ceiling in your embassy quarters," Cody finally said. "Does it ever collapse?" Viran's laughter echoed across the landing field. "No, the ceiling is structurally sound. I give you my word." "Then I suppose," Cody swallowed, a lump forming in his throat, "I suppose I could give it a try." The transition from condemned ruins to diplomatic quarters was, as Varrickson might have put it, not without its complexities. The embassy staff were perplexed by the arrival of the disheveled human child who trailed their senior diplomatic attaché like a weary shadow. The humans among them assumed it was a cultural misunderstanding. Surely Drarans did not casually adopt street urchins. The Drarans, however, grasped the situation immediately and were more intrigued by the rescue details than by questioning their colleagues' decision. Cody, too, faced adjustments. The accommodations Varrickson provided were vaster than the entire transit station he had previously inhabited. The bed was exceedingly soft, initially making him feel as though he were sinking into quicksand rather than resting. The food was plentiful and often perplexing, featuring unfamiliar dishes and flavors. But the most significant challenge was trust. Cody constantly anticipated the other shoe dropping. He would awaken in the dead of night, convinced it was all a dream, and he was back to shivering beneath his threadbare blanket in Sector 12. He would flinch when Varrickson reached out, expecting a blow instead of a gesture of affection. He hid food in his room, certain that it might be absent the next day. He relentlessly tested boundaries, probing to discover when the kindness would cease and the true rules would be revealed. He broke things, initially by accident, then deliberately, awaiting a punishment that never materialized. He lied about trivial matters, inconsequential things, simply to see if Varrickson would catch him and react with the anger he had come to expect from adults. The anger never came. Instead, there were conversations, long, patient discussions where Varrickson explained that accidents happened, and lying was understandable given years of self-preservation, but that here, such defenses were no longer necessary. "I don't know how to stop," Cody admitted one evening, curled in a corner of his room after shattering a decorative vase that had likely cost more than everything he had ever possessed combined. "I don't know how to be normal." Varrickson settled on the floor beside him, folding his wings awkwardly in the confined space. "There is no normal, Cody," he said. "There is only learning to adapt to your circumstances. You learned one way of living. Now you are learning another. It requires time. What if I never learn? What if I'm always broken?" "You are not broken." Varrickon's voice was firm yet gentle. "You are adapted. You became precisely what you needed to be to survive. There is no shame in that. Now we are simply expanding your repertoire." Viran noticed. Of course he noticed. The Droran had spent decades deciphering intentions from the subtlest gestures, and Cody was far from subtle. "You do not have to trust me," Varrickson said one evening, finding Cody gazing out the window at the unfamiliar stars. "Trust is earned, not demanded. All I ask is that you grant me the opportunity to earn it." "How long?" Cody inquired. "As long as it takes. I'm not going anywhere, Cody. And neither are you." It took months. It involved Cody screaming through nightmares that left him hoarse. It included panic attacks in crowded places, meltdowns over minor frustrations, and one notable incident with a kitchen knife that ended with both of them weeping on the floor. Cody from shame, Varrickson from an emotion Cody would later identify as the profound pain of loving someone so deeply that their suffering became his own. But gradually, incrementally, trust began to form. The embassy school presented another challenge. The other students, children of diplomats and ambassadors from a dozen different species, had never encountered anyone quite like Cody. His reading skills lagged behind theirs, and he lacked basic knowledge they took for granted. He approached problems in ways that baffled his instructors, yet also impressed them. Some students were cruel, as children often are when confronted with difference. They taunted him with names like gutter rat scrap picker, and rust crawler, laughing at his struggles with concepts they had mastered years prior. Cody absorbed their taunts with a stoicism that concerned Varrickson more than tears would have. When the Droran inquired, Cody simply shrugged. "I've endured worse." "That does not make it acceptable," Varrickson countered. "No, but it makes it survivable, and survival is what I excel at." However, not all the students were cruel. A Turan girl named Pavana, whose family had been refugees before her father's diplomatic appointment, understood the experience of being an outsider. She began sitting with Cody at lunch, sharing notes and explaining concepts the teachers assumed everyone already understood. There was also a Droran boy named Tessex, 2 years Cody's junior, who was born with a wing deformity that hampered his flight. He knew the weight of being different among his own kind, of facing expectations he couldn't meet. He and Cody formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared sense of inadequacy. Slowly, as the months passed, Cody began to build a community. Not the desperate, necessity-driven community of the streets, but something gentler. A community forged by choice, shared experiences, and individuals who decided the new kid from the ruins might be worth knowing. "You're certain you don't require medical attention?" his science instructor asked one day, genuinely astonished, after a laboratory mishap left Cody with minor burns on his hands. "Your hands? I've experienced worse." The instructor paused, his gaze falling on the old scars that marked Cody's fingers, remnants of his salvage work and survival struggles. His expression shifted from concern to respect. "I imagine you have." It was a small moment, but Cody remembered it. The first time a teacher had viewed his past as a source of strength rather than a problem to be rectified. "I needed to ascertain if a cargo crate would detonate if opened in low gravity," Cody explained. "It seemed important." "But you didn't know the periodic table until last week." The periodic table never threatened to explode. He was behind in some areas and ahead in others, his education a patchwork quilt of survival necessities rather than curriculum requirements. Yet, he was exceptionally intelligent. Once he understood that learning was a tool rather than an obstacle, his progress accelerated dramatically. Varan, for his part, was also learning. He had never raised a fledgling before, and human children operated on entirely different principles than Dran Young. Cody required more sleep than Varrickson anticipated. He needed constant temperature regulation, which Varrickson found perplexing, and under no circumstances could he be expected to consume the traditional Droran breakfast of raw Zycor meat, regardless of its nutritional value. "You're making that face again," Avrayson observed one morning. "What face?" "The one that says, 'My guardian offered me something that was still moving and expected me to eat it. It had legs.' It was a delicacy," Varrickson protested. "It had legs, and it was using them." They learned to compromise. Varrickson discovered that human children thrived on something called pizza, a flatbread adorned with melted dairy and various toppings. Cody discovered that Drawn culture embraced extensive rituals surrounding shared meals, and participating in them brought Varrickson more happiness than any gift ever could. The media, naturally, eventually seized upon the story. Street Urchin Saves diplomatic icon was a headline too compelling to ignore, and within weeks, Cody's face was appearing on news feeds across the sector. The attention made him uneasy. He had spent years striving for invisibility, and now everyone wanted to see him. However, the attention also brought something else. Other children, other survivors, kids who saw Cody's story and recognized a reflection of themselves, who began appearing at the embassy gates, inquiring if perhaps, just perhaps, there was room for one more. There wasn't, of course. The embassy lacked the capacity to house an army of orphans, no matter how much Varrickson might have wished to help. But the inquiries sowed a seed, an idea that would take years to fully blossom. When Cody turned 13, Varrickson presented him with an official document inscribed in both standard and Droran script, a certificate of Velarax, formally recognizing Cody as Varrickon's fledgling under Droran law. "This signifies you are my son," Varrickon explained. "In every sense that matters to my people. You are entitled to my protection, my resources, my name if you desire it. It means that upon my death, hopefully centuries from now, you will inherit all that I possess." Cody stared at the document. "I don't want your possessions." "I know. That is precisely why you should have them. What if I fail? What if I'm not what you believe me to be? Verax's expression softened. Cody, I have observed you for 2 years. I have witnessed you struggle, falter, and rise again. I have seen you assist your classmates with problems you barely understood, simply because they required help. I have seen you share your lunch with a younger student who forgot hers, even when it meant going hungry yourself. He paused. You are precisely what I believe you to be, and I am honored to call you my son. There were tears. There were hugs, awkward at first, as Drorans were not built for such embraces, and Cody still flinched at sudden contact, but sincere in their intent. A small gathering was held with embassy staff, who had come to accept the peculiar human child as one of their own. Then, after the celebration concluded and the guests had departed, Veraxen revealed the truth about the kidnapping. The individual who orchestrated my capture, Veraxen stated, his voice carefully modulated, was a former business associate, a Droran named Keith Umberwing. We had invested in a shipping venture together, and when it failed, he lost everything. His fortune, his standing, his family's approval. So he blamed you. He blamed everyone. But I was the most convenient target. He hired Korvax and the humans to carry out the deed. He lacked the courage to confront me directly. He anticipated receiving the ransom and using it to rebuild his life. Instead, he will spend the next 30 years in a maximum security facility, contemplating his choices. Good. Veraxen looked at his adopted son with something akin to awe. Cody, do you comprehend what you accomplished that night? You did not merely save my life. You exposed a corrupt network that had been operating in this sector for decades. The subsequent investigation following Korvax's apprehension led to 17 additional arrests, the liberation of dozens of trafficking victims, and the complete dismantling of the Hollow Rings operations on Veridon Prime. Cody processed this information. So, I accidentally became a hero? There was nothing accidental about it. You made a choice when you heard my voice in the forest. Every consequence that followed stemmed from that single act of courage. The years elapsed. Cody grew taller, stronger, and more intelligent, though he never entirely shed the slender frame that marked him as a child who had endured prolonged periods without adequate nutrition. He graduated from the embassy school with honors, surprising no one more than himself. He discovered a talent for negotiation, which Veraxen attributed to his years of survival trading, but which Cody suspected originated from a deeper source. At 18, Cody enrolled in the Galactic Accord's Diplomatic Academy, following in his adopted father's footsteps. It was not an easy path. He was a human in a program dominated by species with millennia of diplomatic experience, but he had long ago learned that easy paths rarely led to destinations of value. At 22, he completed his first solo mission, successfully negotiating the release of hostages from a pirate vessel using nothing but his wit and a highly convincing bluff about non-existent backup forces. Upon reaching the age of 25, he established the Bramwell Quailthorne Foundation, an organization devoted to the identification and support of orphaned children throughout the sector. The foundation operated various facilities, including residential homes, educational institutions, and vocational training programs, offering individuals like himself an opportunity for a brighter future. The undertaking was arduous, not in a physical sense, although considerable manual labor was involved in constructing shelters and managing supply logistics. Rather, the emotional toll was immense. Every child Cody encountered served as a stark reminder of his own past. He recognized the fear in their eyes, their involuntary flinches at sudden movements, and their persistent testing of boundaries. This profound empathy was simultaneously what burdened him and what rendered him exceptionally effective. He understood the children's needs because he had experienced them firsthand. He could discern genuine promises from hollow ones, and he knew that often, the most vital solace wasn't material sustenance, but simply being perceived, acknowledged as an individual deserving of care. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Verax observed one evening, finding Cody at his desk past midnight, meticulously reviewing case files and placement applications. "These children cannot afford to wait for me to catch up on sleep, and they possess nothing at all. If you succumb to exhaustion and become incapacitated..." Verax moved to the desk and firmly closed the file Cody was examining. "You have staff for a reason. You have volunteers. You have an entire network of individuals who share your vision. You are not compelled to bear this burden alone. But I am the one who understands, Cody countered. You are the one who initiated this endeavor. That does not imply you are the sole custodian of its continuation. Verexen's tone softened. Your mother would be immensely proud of what you have accomplished, Cody, but she would also implore you to prioritize your own well-being. The mere mention of his mother was enough to break through Cody's resolve. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes, suddenly feeling the weight of every lost hour of sleep pressing down on him. Just one more hour, he conceded. Then I will retire for the night. 30 minutes, 45 completed. Birkin observed his son's professional journey with an immeasurable sense of pride. The Droran had lived for over 2 centuries, achieved feats destined for historical record, amassed considerable wealth, influence, and respect. Yet nothing in his extensive existence had brought him as much fulfillment as witnessing Cody Bramwell blossom into the person he was always meant to be. You know, Verexen remarked one evening as they shared a meal in the quarters that had long since become their shared domicile, I've been reflecting on your words that night in the forest, regarding your mother's assertion that one can always discern a person's true character by their actions when unobserved. Cody looked up from his plate. What about it? I was observing that night, Verexen continued. I witnessed your immediate decision to offer assistance, even before you knew my identity or the potential implications of rescuing me. I saw the kind of person you are, Cody. In that moment when you believed no one would ever know, Cody added, I wasn't seeking recognition. I understand that is precisely your point, Verexen stated, his amber eyes locking onto Cody's with the same intensity as their initial encounter, though now imbued with warmth and what humans might term affection. You acted because it was the right thing to do, and that is precisely why you have dedicated every subsequent day to the same principle, making ethical choices, even when they are difficult, even when no one would fault you for stepping away. I learned from the best, Cody replied. Verexen chuckled, the sound resonating like distant thunder. Flattery will not earn you the last portion of dessert. Worth a try, Cody quipped. They continued their meal in a comfortable silence, the kind that arises only between individuals who have no need to impress one another. I will be retiring next year, Verexen announced eventually. Cody nearly dropped his cutlery. What? You have served as a diplomat for 150 years. Precisely. It is time for a change. The Droran's expression was contemplative. The Foundation requires a dedicated advocate, someone with diplomatic acumen capable of navigating the complex systems of numerous worlds, someone who comprehends the struggles of those children because they have personally experienced them. You will join my foundation, if you will permit me. Cody gazed at his father, processing this unexpected proposition. For years he had followed in Verexen's footsteps, emulating his example, striving to honor his legacy. Now the Droran was offering to walk alongside him, to champion his vision, his mission, his endeavor to improve the galaxy. I believe, Cody said slowly, that might be the most exceptional idea you have ever conceived. I have entertained many commendable notions in my 2 centuries of existence. This remains the most outstanding. Verexen's scales flushed with a warm, amber glow of satisfaction. I am pleased you think so. I have already initiated the transition proceedings. There is a young Dran, Thessaly Ironwing, who demonstrates remarkable aptitude and is being considered as my successor. She may lack experience, but she possesses something far more valuable. And what is that? Cody inquired. The very quality I recognized in you that night in the forest, Verexen replied. The impulse to help, even when faced with danger, even when there is no personal gain. The fortitude to do what is right, simply because it is right. Cody nodded thoughtfully. That is undeniably the most critical qualification of all. Indeed, Verexen agreed, rising from the table and extending his wings in a gesture Cody had come to associate with deep contentment. Now, I believe you have an early engagement tomorrow with the Veridan Prime Colonial Council regarding the construction permits for the new youth shelter. You should probably rest. Are you seriously assigning me a bedtime? Cody protested, a hint of amusement in his voice. I am 25 years old. "And you still do not get enough sleep," Verixen retorted gently. "Some things never change." Cody laughed, the sound echoing through the quarters that had become his sanctuary, through the embassy that had transformed into his community, and out into the night sky of a world that had once seemed determined to erase him. He sometimes thought of his mother, particularly during the quiet of late nights when the stars shone brightly and the silence was profound. He wondered if she could perceive him from wherever she might be. He pondered if she was proud, but his thoughts most often gravitated towards the children still out there, those concealed in derelict districts, sleeping beneath overpasses, uncertain if anyone would ever extend them compassion. He recalled the sound he had heard in the forest years ago, a muffled cry from someone in desperate need of aid, and he contemplated the profound significance of responding to that call. The narrative of the homeless human boy and the Droran diplomat became a widespread legend across the sector in the ensuing years. It was recounted in educational institutions and shelters, in diplomatic academies and corporate boardrooms. It was adapted into educational curricula and featured in documentary films, gradually becoming a legend in its own right. However, Cody never placed much importance on the legend itself. His focus remained resolutely on the tangible outcomes: the thousands of children who found refuge through the Foundation, the numerous planets that improved their support systems for vulnerable populations, and the gradual yet persistent shift in the galaxy's approach to those who had been overlooked. At the age of 42, Cody Bramwell was appointed Special Ambassador for Youth Welfare by the Galactic Accord, becoming the youngest individual ever to hold such a position and the first human to be nominated for it by a Drorian delegation. Verixen, now a distinguished elder within his lineage, was present for the ceremony. His scales had softened with age, their vibrant hues muted to more subdued tones, but his eyes retained their remarkable sharpness. "You know," the elder Draren remarked after the speeches concluded and the dignitaries had departed, "when I was ensnared on that communications tower, I was convinced my end was imminent. I had made peace with it. I had accepted that my life was over. And then a scrawny child appeared with a damaged medical scanner. And then a scrawny child arrived and irrevocably altered everything." Verax's voice, thick with emotion, continued, "You saved my life, Cody. But more importantly, you gave me a reason to continue living it. You reminded me that the galaxy is populated by individuals worthy of our defense, worthy of our belief." "I learned that from you," Cody responded. "You learned it long before you encountered me. Your mother imparted that lesson. Your circumstances taught you. Your own heart guided you." Verixen extended a hand, gripping Cody's shoulder, a gesture that had once elicited a flinch from the young boy, but now felt like a profound homecoming. "I merely provided you with the opportunity to demonstrate it." Cody covered his father's clawed hand with his own. "Then I suppose we saved each other." "Yes," Verixen concurred. "I suppose we did." The sun began its descent over Port Callaway, casting the sky in hues of amethyst and gold. In the distance, the lights of the Bramwell Quailthorn Youth Center began to illuminate, welcoming another evening's intake of children with no other refuge. Cody Bramwell, once a street urchin, a diplomatic attaché, a special ambassador, and a son, watched the lights flicker on, experiencing a profound emotion he had spent years learning to recognize: hope. It was not the desperate, fragile hope of a child hiding amidst ruins, anticipating change, but the firm, unshakable hope of someone who had witnessed transformation and understood its potential for recurrence. His mother had spoken the truth all those years ago. One could truly discern a person's character by their actions when unobserved. And Cody had made his choice on a dark, whispering night in the forest, when an unexpected cry had compelled him to act. He had responded without fully comprehending why. That single decision had shaped everything that followed, transforming a homeless boy into a cherished son, a stranger into a father, and reminding the galaxy that even the smallest act of bravery could resonate across the celestial expanse.